Hello and welcome to Daniel and Revelation Prophetic Bible Study. We are on Session 6. If you are watching this series for the first time, I would recommend that you start with Session 1 and watch all the sessions so you get an understanding of the background of where we are now. Today we are going to study Daniel chapter 3. So in chapter 3 we are going to see the image of gold. So in chapter 2, king had a dream and he called all the wise men, and then they could not do any good. So Daniel has to come and interpret the dream. If you remember the dream, what Daniel explained, there was an image or a statue, and it was of the head of gold, and then different metals, silver, bronze, and iron, and then clay and all that. So that is the background that we are coming into with chapter 3. So remember the statue, gold, silver, iron and clay, that was the statue. That was the dream that Nebuchadnezzar had. In fact, he was wondering what is going to happen in the future, because all of a sudden he got all this power. He was a small king with his dad Nebuchadnezzar in one place, and then all of a sudden, he won the battles at Carchemish, and then he took the kings at Judah and Egypt. So now he had a big empire here. So with all that, he was wondering what's going to happen, and he had a dream that God showed him that he is the head of the gold, and then there's after him will other kingdoms come, and all that we studied in chapter 2. So with that background, let's get to chapter 3 in verse 1. Nebuchadnezzar the king made an image of gold, whose height was 60 cubits and its width 6 cubits. He set it up in the plain of Dura in the province of Babylon. The image, the statue, or the dream that King Nebuchadnezzar had is not a complete statue of gold. Remember that? It's not a complete statue of gold. It was just the head of gold. Now, in defiance to God's vision that he got, he is saying, forget about all the other kingdoms. I am going to make myself the only kingdom. So he made it this statue of gold. So Nebuchadnezzar king made an image of gold. So this statue is full of gold. Some scholars believe that he had vast amounts of gold. He could even do this. And some believe it was done with some kinds of alloys or different materials, but overlaid with gold, which is possible, which we have seen in the other descriptions in the Bible. So either way, we don't have to worry about that, but it looks like a gold statue, gold image. So Nebuchadnezzar king made an image of gold. But look at this height. The height was 60 cubits and width of 6 cubits. He set it up in the plain of Dura in the province of Babylon. So what is this cubit? So in Bible, we usually measure, or sometimes it was measured in cubits. Here is an example or a description given. A cubit is a linear measurement used by many ancient and medieval peoples. It may have originated in Egypt around 3000 BC. So the cubit generally taken as equal to 18 inches. Somewhere between 18 inches was based on the length of the arm from the elbow to the tip of the middle finger. So if you look at it, so if you start from here, from elbow to the middle finger, so if you don't have a measuring tape, if you don't have anything, so the best measuring tool is what? You have your hand with you. So people used to measure a cubit is typically from your elbow to the top of your middle finger. So that's and usually it is like 18 inches to 20 inches depending on the versions. The more the ancient, like Egyptians used to have like 22 inches. So no matter what it is, standard calculation usually uses 18 inches. So some of the modern translations of the Bible, they don't even mention the word cubit. They just go into the regular measurement units. So King Nebuchadnezzar made a gold statue 90 feet tall. You see, so the NLT gives it as 90 feet tall and 9 feet wide, and set it up in the plain of Dura in the province of Babylon. Think about 90 feet. It's something like a 9-story building. Each story, if approximately 10 feet. So if you go that way, so it's at 9 feet or 10 feet, 10-story building tall, and wide of 6 feet. But this does not portray an image of a man, or so typically the dimensions are not that right. So what does it mean? So I will show you with some examples, so we'll understand what is going on here. If you have to set up a good, big statue like that, you need a bigger base, right? So you need a bigger base and a wider base. So if you look at this statue here, you see there was a wider base, 90 feet tall. So here again, I just want to bring it to your attention about what we talked about in Daniel chapter 2. So here we have the head of gold, the chest and arms of silver, belly and thighs of bronze, legs of iron, feet of iron and clay. And Nebuchadnezzar or Daniel did not tell us the posture of this, the image of this man, right? Whether he's standing, folding his hands, or whether he's stretching out his arms, or we don't know. So either way, we don't know what the image looked like. So the dimensions were given the way it was given. So I just want to show some of the statues, so we'll get an understanding and appreciation of what was going on there. So here, if you look at the Statue of Liberty, so there is a huge base, a pedestal on which this Statue of Liberty was set up. So from head to top, it's 111 feet tall. From base to the torch, it is 151 feet. So it's quite a big statue here. So for those days, for the days when Nebuchadnezzar was the king, I think that 90 feet itself is remarkable with the technology what they had back then. So I just want to show you some other statues in the world. Now this statue, which was installed I think recently in the last or 2 years ago, maybe last year I guess, Statue of Unity. This is in India. Indian statesman and independence activist Vallabhbhai Patel. So this is the world's largest statue right now as it stands. So, and if you look at this and another view of this image, and there you see a tiny picture at the bottom. That's the Prime Minister of India, the small tiny guy there, right there. And so that gives you an understanding of how tall this image is. It's like the toe itself is somewhere like 6-7 maybe feet, I guess. But anyway, so these are the statues of the world. And here you see world's tallest statue compared with all other statues, the 182-meter statue of the Statue of Unity in India. And then Spring Temple Buddha in China, and another one in China, and then the Statue of Liberty, 93 meters. And the last one is Christ the Redeemer in Brazil, 38 meters. So if let's say if you are measuring the last one, the Christ the Redeemer Brazil, how do you measure the width of that? So whether you stretch, because the hands stretched there. So the point I'm trying to make is we don't know the posture, that the image that Nebuchadnezzar saw the vision and he's trying to set that up. So it could be anything. It could be the measurement of the base, or it could be the posture itself, stretching the arms, or whatever it may be. So here is another view of the Christ the Redeemer statue, just to see what it looks like in Brazil. So the base itself is 8 meters here, and the statue is 30 meters, and the width is 28 meters. So if we just give some numbers like a statue of Jesus in Brazil with 28 meters wide, it doesn't make sense unless we understand that the arms are stretched out. So the point I'm trying to make is we don't know the posture, so the dimensions could be anything the measurement is, but it's remarkably a big statue. That's what my point was. So here is another view. This in itself is very remarkable to look at. So it would be Nebuchadnezzar's statue is somewhere like 10-story tall building. So that's what my point is, and it is quite remarkable, especially in those days, ancient days. So here is an example that we saw, the golden image. As you see, this is completely different from what we studied in chapter 2. So chapter 2, we have all these different metals, but here it is fully overlaid with gold, or either a golden statue. Either way, it is like defying what God said to him. He said, it is only you are the head of the gold and the other kingdoms will follow, but he is in doing in defiance of what God revealed to him. So we are going to see actually the way he talked to the other people about the statue. So that tells us some of the the idea behind setting up this statue. So that's what we're going to study tonight. So verse 2, and King Nebuchadnezzar sent word to gather together the satraps. The word satraps is like, the princes of the kingdoms. Various kingdoms, they have the princes, the kings ruling those, but they're all reporting. There may be vassal kings, but they are all reporting to King Nebuchadnezzar. So King Nebuchadnezzar sent word to gather all those kings, princes, so that is the satraps, the administrators, the next level, the governors and the counselors, the treasurers, the judges, the magistrates, and all the officials of the provinces. How does it look like? So basically, he's summoning all the people at the top levels. So that can maybe cabinet, maybe different countries, different areas, all the administrative people to come here to the dedication of the image which King Nebuchadnezzar has set up. So it's like an official communication. So everybody should come and to this dedication that king has set up. So verse 3, so after that the announcement or the communication, so now verse 3, so the satraps, the administrators, the governors, the counselors, the treasurers, the judges, the magistrates, and all the officials of the provinces gathered together for the dedication of the image that King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. And they stood before the image that Nebuchadnezzar had set up. One thing I noticed in this, in the way it was described is, you see the verse 2, it gives a list of officers, different ranks of the officers. So they were all summoned to come here. Now verse 3 says they all came. Instead of saying they all came, so now they are repeating again. So the satraps came, the administrators, the governors, the counselors. We see this kind of writing throughout this chapter and throughout this book. Everything was repeated sometimes to make a case. Maybe that's how the ancient writing works. So, but anyway, so just keep that in mind. So it's kind of a repeat of verse 2. But here in verse 3, it is basically saying that they all came and stood before the image that Nebuchadnezzar has set up. At this time, I just want to keep you also be reminded of one thing that we discussed in chapter 2. In chapter 2, after Daniel revealed the vision, Daniel explained the dream to the king. He sat at the king's gate. I mentioned that, that's like, he is in the palace doing some job, maybe a Supreme Court judge or something. Usually, as I said, sat at the king's gate is something like a royal position in the palace in itself. But then you see Shadrach, Meshach, and Abed-Nego was given some kind of a leaders or head officials of some provinces. So they are in different provinces. So now what it appears to me is that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abed-Nego were heads of some provinces. And now this royal communication went there to tell all these heads of the provinces to come to the dedication. So that is what we'll have in mind before we go to the next verse. So let's see. In verse 4, then a herald cried out, "To you it is commanded, O peoples, nations, and languages, that at the time you hear the sound of the horn, the flute, harp, lyre, the psaltery, and symphony with all kinds of music, you shall fall down and worship the gold image that King Nebuchadnezzar has set up." Maybe I should ask Pastor Ron about all these instruments. I don't know how these instruments work. Some of these instruments I even don't know. So anyway, so there are so many instruments. There are the wind instruments. There are the stringed instruments. All these instruments, it's a big orchestra. In other words, it's a big orchestra. So what they're doing is for the dedication, they have a big party there, big orchestra, and so all these people were gathered together there. And so what the message was when they all came there, it was proclaimed to them, to you it is commanded. It is a command of the king, O peoples, nations, and languages. As I said, like this communication went out to all the regions now where Nebuchadnezzar holds reigns of all these areas. So now there may be different nations, they speak different languages. So that's why it says, O peoples, nations, and languages, that at the time you hear the sound of the horn, flute, harp, lyre, and psaltery, and symphony with all kinds of music, you shall fall down and worship the gold image that King Nebuchadnezzar has set up. But in the official communication that went out, nowhere it was mentioned that you need to come here and worship the image. The official communication that went out was, you are invited for a dedication party, right? So that is what the official communication went out in verse 2. So as if it was said, like, we are going to, install a statue here. So you're all coming, invited for this dedication. But now once they come here, once they stand before this image, now the message is different. So the message is, to you it is commanded that you should bow down before and worship the gold image that King Nebuchadnezzar has set up. So that is the message now given to them. And verse 5, and whoever does not fall and worship shall be cast immediately into the midst of a burning fiery furnace. So the message is very clear. The commandment is very clear. What is that? That is, if you are not obeying the king's command, if you are not obeying and worshipping this image, massive 10-story or 9-story image, you will be immediately cast into the burning fiery furnace. This is nothing new to Nebuchadnezzar. So he has roasted a couple of officers before, false prophets before. And for him, if he gets angry, either the heads will be rolled off or throw them into a fiery furnace like this. So this is nothing new, knowing the person of Nebuchadnezzar. So that is the command. And whoever does not fall down and worship shall be cast immediately into the midst of the burning fiery furnace. So here, we see the Nebuchadnezzar's fury, as I just alluded to. We are going to look at this verse. The Lord make you like Zedekiah and Ahab. Don't get confused with the Zedekiah we studied earlier. So we studied about a king called Zedekiah earlier. So this Zedekiah is different. So don't get confused when you hear the name. So, if you go to some places like, the names, like even here, so we see John. How many Johns? Right now we have multiple Johns on this line. So similarly, Zedekiah is a common name those days. So don't get confused with the Zedekiah, the king that earlier we studied. So that's my point here. So the Lord make you like Zedekiah and Ahab, false prophets. So whom the king of Babylon roasted in fire. So that's, see, I told you about Nebuchadnezzar. If he gets mad or if he don't want a person, that's how he treats them. Because they have committed adultery with their neighbors' wives and have spoken lying words in my name, which I have not commanded them. Indeed, I know and am witness, says the Lord. So you can read this in Jeremiah 29:22-23. So in Jeremiah records about how these two false prophets were treated by King Nebuchadnezzar. In his fury, he roasted these false prophets. And there are other occasions in, if you remember, in the first two sessions, I think we studied about how he gouged out the eyes of King Zedekiah. That's the king, another one. And then he killed his children before he died. He plucked out his eyes. So it is how Nebuchadnezzar's character, or we have seen that when he is furious, what he is going to do. Verse 7. So at the time when all the people heard the sound of the horn, flute, harp, and lyre in symphony with all kinds of music, all the people, nations, and languages fell down and worshipped the gold image which King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. So now again, as I said, the first time we saw the list of the ranks of officers given there, and now the list of the instruments. So now the list of instruments also repeated every time. So when they want to say that the orchestra, or instead of saying that, they just give the list of instruments. So verse 7 is kind of a list of instruments repeating, but this time it is like, when they heard all these instruments, now what they did, they fell down. All people, nations, and languages fell down and worshipped the gold image which King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. So basically, they just obeyed the king's command, right? So they just heard this and then they just obeyed king's command. Daniel chapter 3, verse 7. So now, this I want to show you why is he setting up this image, so the golden image, and he's also bringing different nations, different people, and different nations have different gods, different people have different cultures, they do all kinds of different worships. So now, in essence, what he is trying to do is he is trying to make one world religion. Did you hear that term, one world religion? That's coming up again. So one world religion. So all the religions, they try to amalgamate, bring it into one religion. And that is what, in essence, Nebuchadnezzar is doing here. So he set up and then call all these people and say that this is your God, worship this God. And he is trying to bring it to a one world religion. And some people say that this statue is Nebuchadnezzar himself. And some people argue that this is Marduk, Nebuchadnezzar's favorite god. And some people argue it's a Bel, another god that Babylonians worship. So no matter what it is, so it doesn't matter. But here is a statue he is forcing everyone to worship. So that much we know. So the one world religion, this was nothing new in the world, but a repetition of the Tower of Babel. If you remember, if you studied Genesis, the very first book in the Bible, there is the Tower of Babel. So this is kind of a repetition what Nebuchadnezzar is doing. So this was nothing new in the world, but a repetition of the Tower of Babel, a forming of one region for the world, one religion for the world. I think if you remember the Tower of Babel, that's what they try to build one big tower, and they try to bring in all the people so that they worship God there, and they worship this one world religion. So it's kind of a repeat what Nebuchadnezzar was doing when you compare with the Tower of Babel. And so this is not going to be the last. We are going to see this in the book of Revelation. Towards the end, towards the Antichrist will also come, and like a Nebuchadnezzar dictating everyone to worship an image or worship himself. So this is what we're going to see, a one world religion popping up these days. So there are many who are working towards a world religion today, one world religion today, including the denominations which make up the World Council of Churches. Sometimes some churches are, without the proper understanding of the Bible, without proper understanding of the scriptures, they buy into this kind of one world religion thing. So that is where you see this one world religion coming up. So be careful. And of course, Bible tells us, do not be deceived. If you read the Gospels, how many times Jesus said, do not be deceived, do not be deceived. So we need to be very careful about all these new religions, one world religions and all that. So we will not be deceived by this one world religion. That's another topic for another day. So this was more than a dedication, as you can see. So although, as I said in verse 2, he said that you come here for the dedication, but then here he is forcing the people to worship by a decree. So he is forcing them to worship by a decree. However, true worship is an expression of the heart. You cannot force, it cannot be forced. So think about this. What is worship? Basically, worship is that it has to come from the heart, and it has to come naturally. So some people don't know worship. So, we generally talk about worship a lot, but, the actual meaning of worship is like this. Worthship. So worship is basically like giving worth of a person, a value, or a thing, and that's where this worship came from. So if you are giving a value to that person or a deity or a thing, that is, you are setting a value. So think about this next time when you talk about worship. So how much value are you setting up? So the value you place upon a deity, person, object of worship, or a thing, that is worship. Of course, we do that by singing songs, we do that by reading the scriptures, we do that by prayer and all that. These are all the tools that we use, but the key of worship is how much value are you placing on the person or the object or whatever it means. That's why sometimes people worship other people. If you go to India, there are, people worship other people. So there are a lot of gurus, there are a lot of sages, there are wise people and all kinds of things. And people worship, objects. People worship idols, So the point here is the value that you place upon a deity or a person, that is what actually the worship is all about. So now here we come to Shadrach, Meshach, and Abed-Nego disobey the king. So in the previous verse, we saw that, everyone fall down and worshiped, but there is an exception here. So that means Therefore, at that time, certain Chaldeans came forward and accused the Jews. So now you see what is happening here. I think even the setting up of this golden statue is maybe it's not King Nebuchadnezzar's idea in the first place itself. So there are Chaldeans, you remember when they came before the king to interpret the dream, they were unable to do that. And finally, who were able to do that? This Daniel, Shadrach, and Meshach, and Abed-Nego, they came and stood before the king, and kind of like they took their job, and then they took their knowledge was 10 times much better than the other people. So they had this kind of a grudge in their minds, I believe. So first of all, instead of being thankful, if not for Daniel, if not for this group of Jews, what would happen to those Babylonian wise men? King would have killed all them. In fact, the executioner went out to kill them, right? So that's when Daniel intervened and said, hey, give me a time, I'm going to interpret the dream. Otherwise, all of them would be dead. Instead of being thankful, they did not like that these people being promoted to high places. So now they found a way that they could talk to king and then try to catch these people in their act of worship in the religion. So now that's you can read through between the lines here. So that's what is happening here. Therefore, at that time, certain Chaldeans came forward and accused the Jews. So what is the accusation here? So they spoke and said to the king Nebuchadnezzar, "O king, live forever." This is a traditional ancient way of acknowledging the king. So, "O king, live forever." And then here is what they are going to tell the king. "You, O king, have made a decree that everyone who hears the sound of," again, the list of the instruments comes here again, horn, flute, harp, lyre, and psaltery in the symphony with all kinds of music, shall fall down and worship the gold image, right? So that's the king's decree. So they're just repeating what king has decreed upon. "And whoever does not fall down and worship shall be cast into the midst of burning fiery furnace." So they just reminded the king what the decree was all about. So that tells me that these Chaldeans had some kind of a part in this kind of a decree, so either directly or indirectly. So that's why they are just bringing up to the king and say, "Hey, this is king, you did this." So now see the response in verse 12. "There are certain Jews whom you have set over the affairs of the province of Babylon." You see, so king already promoted in chapter 2, we saw that, so he promoted Shadrach, Meshach, and Abed-Nego. So now they are telling king. So there are certain Jews whom you have set over the affairs of the province of Babylon, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abed-Nego. These men, O king, have not paid due regard to you. They do not serve your gods or worship the gold image you have set up. So they're just telling what happened here. So these people are not worshiping your gods. So of course, when you tell that, and of course with the penalty of the decree, like, if you don't do this, you have this, you'll be thrown into the fiery furnace. So with that kind of a decree, king has to act upon. If he is not going to act upon in front of these guys, then he will look like a weak person. So, even whether he likes these people, he has to act upon his own decree that he sent out. So now that is where he was. So let's see why these three Jewish men were not bowing down to the image. So we know that they are captured from Judah. We studied that in the first 3 sessions. And they are very good religious people. Like, even the food, they are not willing to compromise. So they had certain things they have to follow. So I told you, if you want to change my name, okay, you can change my name. If you want to cut my hair, that's fine. If you want to change my dress, that's fine. All those things they agreed upon. But the one thing they did not agreed was they don't want to eat any food that was offered to the idols. Remember that in the first chapter? So now this is the second step. So in this second step, they are denying to bow down before these idols. So we can read the reason for that. In Exodus, we see this. In Exodus chapter 20, we see, "I am the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt." So for those who don't know the background is children of Israel, they were all in bondage in Egypt. So Joseph was made the prime minister of Egypt, So when Joseph was the prime minister, they had a very good time, but later a new king, a pharaoh came, and then they did not like these people. So they were all put in the slavery. So they were in the 400 years, they were in the bondage. So the Lord sent Moses to deliver them out of bondage. So that is the background. So I am the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. You shall have no other gods before me. So this is a very clear command by the Lord Jehovah, the people, the Israelites worship. So God said, you shall not have no other gods before me. You shall not make of yourself a carved image, any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, or that is in the earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. So that covers fish, that covers animals, that covers humans, that covers everything. So what he's saying is you should not have any kind of image, and you shall not bow down to them nor serve them, because God is very clear. And of course Bible also tells the reason God is spirit, and those who worship him must worship him in spirit and in truth. We see that in New Testament also, conveying the same message. So that's the background. And in verse 5 of that chapter, you shall not bow down to them nor serve them. Why? For I am the Lord your God, I am a jealous God, visiting the iniquity of the fathers upon the children to the third and for the fourth generations of those who hate me, but showing mercy to thousands to those who love me and keep my commands. Sometimes people read this and get, oh, what is this kind of a God? He is a jealous God. You shall not take the name of the Lord your God in vain, for the Lord will not hold him guiltless who takes his name in vain. So sometimes people do not understand what the meaning of the jealousy here. So that's why they think that, oh, something is wrong with this God. Why is he jealous? If he is a jealous God, how can he be God? In fact, there are people asking these kinds of questions. If he is jealous, how can he be God, right? So let me explain a little bit about the God. You need to understand, because when you come across these passages, sometimes people have a bad understanding of the character of God. So let me take you on a little, can God be jealous, right? So that's the topic we're now talking about. Although jealousy and envy are interchangeably used in our modern English language, they mean different things. Sinful jealousy, right, or envy is coveting something that does not belong to you. Be very careful here. That means if something is not belonging to you, and if you desire that, that's like, that's a sinful jealousy, or envy is coveting something that does not belong to you. Here is an example of sinful jealousy about King Saul. So from the time on Saul kept a jealous eye on David. You know why? When people started praising David for his valor and victories in the battlefield, Saul kept a jealous eye, which is wrong. Another example of sinful jealousy about Rachel. When Rachel did not have children, but the other sister had children, she envied her. Now when Rachel saw that she bore Jacob no children, Rachel envied her sister and said to Jacob, give me children or else I'll die. So that's a kind of the jealousy or the envy we are talking about. That's sinful. So that is very clear. The right kind of jealousy is appropriate when someone takes what is rightly belongs to you. If something rightly belongs to you, so that is right. God created us in his image. We are his children and his prized possession, right? Remember that always. We need to understand that there is there is only one God and no rival or equal to him. So you have to understand again that point. There is no rival or no equal to him. Even the so-called opponent, Satan, is a created being. God created Lucifer, an archangel, and of course the angel fell down in rebellion. So that's what we call Satan. That is a created being. So you cannot compare a created being with the creator. So even Satan, the opponent, the so-called opponent, is not even equal or rival. So Apostle Paul writes, we know that an idol is nothing in this world, and that there is no other God but one. But when God's people who are created in his image turn to idols which are not God's, so God should be jealous, right? So God should be jealous. So that is the reason why because they are his children. I had a topic on this, on my website, on my blog. So you can visit mydailydevotion.org. It has a detailed explanation with more detailed analysis why God can be jealous and still God. So I gave us several examples, like, I don't want to take time on explaining all that. So you may want to extra reading, you may go there. So here, so we talk about Shadrach, Meshach, and Abed-Nego and the king. So the Nebuchadnezzar, in rage and fury, now because of all this, the 10 commandments, because of the commandments, they did not bow down to the image that the Nebuchadnezzar has set up. So, but the king did not like that. So the Nebuchadnezzar, in rage and fury, gave the commandment to bring Shadrach, Meshach, and Abed-Nego. So they brought these men before the king. So now these people are before the king. And 14, Nebuchadnezzar spoke, saying to them, Is it true, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abed-Nego, that you do not serve my gods or worship the gold image which I have set up? So that is what the king was asking them. And then in verse 15 it says, Now if you are ready at this time, you hear the sound of all these instruments. He is giving, in essence, what is he doing? What is he doing? He is full of fury and rage. But now what is he doing in verse 15? He is giving a second chance. This is out of character for Nebuchadnezzar. Do you see? This is completely out of character for Nebuchadnezzar. When they said that, okay, bring these guys, I want to see who these people are who are disobeying. When these three people came, he remembered them. He know who these people are. These are the people with Daniel, the group of Daniel, Shadrach, and Meshach, and Abed-Nego. They interpreted king's dream. And you remember what king did at that time? He fell down before Daniel and of course upon these people also, I guess, and worshipped them. So when king worshipped Daniel and this group of people, and now he saw them, so I think he realized, oh, I'm making a mistake here. But he had a decree that if these people are not going to bow down, he had to throw them in the fire. So he didn't like that, throwing them into fire. So what is he doing is he's giving a second chance. Although it is out of character for him, we have never seen King Nebuchadnezzar giving people second chances. But that is the reason I see here. He is giving a second chance and saying, now if you are ready at this time, you hear the sound of the horn, flute, harp. So probably he's calling the music director, hey, can you repeat the song one more time for this group of people? So that maybe that is what he's doing here. And that's what he's saying. So when you hear the horn, flute, harp, lyre, psaltery, symphony with all kinds of music, and you fall down and worship the image which I have made good. But if you do not worship, you shall be cast immediately into the midst of the burning fiery furnace. And who is the God who will deliver you from my hands? So a little bit ego now, so let's see who is going to deliver you. First of all, he had this decree that if anybody disobeys, has to be thrown into the fire. So he cannot violate that. Of course, if he want to, he can. But if he does that, then he looks weak among the other leaders. So he has to at least fulfill what he has said. And also now to stoke his ego, these people are bringing these Shadrach, Meshach, and Abed-Nego and put them in front of king. Now he's saying, let's see who is going to deliver out of my hands. So that's what he said. And 16, interesting. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abed-Nego answered and said to the king, O Nebuchadnezzar, we have no need to answer you in this matter, because these people, you remember Daniel chapter 1 verse 8, I believe, Daniel said that Daniel purposed in his heart that he would not defile himself. That's what we read in Daniel chapter 1 verse 8. When the food was offered, that time Daniel said he had purposed in his heart not to defile. And these people are resolved. When you are resolved, when you are committed to do certain things, that's what here we see. They are resolved, and especially as a Jew, especially as a practicing Jew, they do not want to bow down to these idols. So they do not want to bow down and worship, violating the God's command, especially the 10 commandments here. So that's what he said. Oh, Nebuchadnezzar, we have no need to answer you in this matter. If that is the case, our God whom we serve is able to deliver us from the burning fiery furnace. They have this confidence in this God, because when they prayed, God revealed the dream to Daniel. So they had this confidence. But sometimes when we pray, not always the prayers are answered. We need to understand, because we don't know the mind of God. Sometimes not answering is the will of God. Not answering may be the right thing for the God to do. I have heard people saying several times, I prayed when I was in college, I prayed for this, but, it did not happen. Now I look back, I thank God for God did not allow that to happen, or things like that. Sometimes we don't know the bigger picture, but only God knows. But either way, here what they are saying is we are not going to bow down. Our God whom we serve is able to deliver us from the burning fiery furnace. And if he will deliver us from your hand, O king. So next verse, but if not, let it be known to you, O king, that we do not serve your gods, nor will we worship the gold image which you have set up. Here they are very mindful of what is going to happen to them. So here they're very clear and mindful of what is going to happen to them. If they defy the king's decree, they are going to be thrown into the burning fiery furnace. They'll be just thrown there and they'll die. They know that. They do not want to bow down and violate God's laws. So in verse 19, then Nebuchadnezzar was full of fury. So of course, we know Nebuchadnezzar, if somebody did not listen to him, he gets mad. So here, then Nebuchadnezzar was full of fury and the expression on his face changed. So far, so far he is kind of gentle with these guys, so he was just kind of bargaining, talking back and forth and all that. So now this time when they refused to obey king's command, and the expression on his face changed now. Now he is really mad. Toward Shadrach, Meshach and Abed-Nego, he spoke and commanded that the heat of the furnace 7 times more than it was usually heated. So, I don't know what difference it makes. If you throw them in the furnace, they are going to die anyway. But he is now asking the furnace to be heated 7 times more than what it was heated before. So that was in his rage. And verse 20, and he commanded certain mighty men of valor who were in his army to bind Shadrach, Meshach and Abed-Nego and cast them into the burning fiery furnace. So when you are the king and when you are issuing a decree and when you are really angry, so what do? You pick the best one. Hey, you call the topmost guy or the mighty man, say, hey, take care of these people. So that's what he's doing. So he commanded certain mighty men of valor to bind Shadrach, Meshach and Abed-Nego and cast them into the burning fiery furnace right there. So that is what we see. Then these men were bound in their coats, their trousers, their turbans, and their other garments, and were cast into the midst of the burning fiery furnace. So the moment king said that, so they did that. They bound them with their coats, their trousers, everything with all their garb on them. Verse 22, therefore, because the king's command was urgent, and the furnace exceeding hot, the flame of the fire killed those men who took up Shadrach, Meshach and Abed-Nego. I don't think these people are ignorant, so the mighty men of valor that king called, the mighty men from the army, whoever to bind Shadrach and Meshach, they have done this several times, I believe. But one thing they did not realize is now the furnace was heated 7 times greater. So they did not realize the heat or something like that, so usually they might have thrown a lot of people there before. This is not the first time, I believe, that they are doing it. But because the furnace was heated 7 times, now what happened, you see, therefore, because the king's command was urgent and the furnace exceedingly hot, the flame of the fire that killed those men who took up Shadrach, Meshach and Abed-Nego. So king lost their mighty men. So in other words, king lost his mighty men because, before, let's talk about Shadrach, Meshach, Abed-Nego a little bit later. But now, he lost his mighty men. So those who bound by Shadrach, Meshach and Abed-Nego. In verse 23, and these 3 men, Shadrach, Meshach and Abed-Nego, fell down bound in the midst of the furnace, burning fiery furnace. So they throw them into the furnace and there they fell. But remember, they are bound. They are bound, their hands, and then they are thrown into the furnace. And now what happens? Here they stood for their convictions. They stood for their convictions, no matter what happens, even to the point of death. You need to understand, sometimes, if we could compromise a little bit here, a little bit there, so that is not really honoring God. So what they believed in, the God of Israel, the God who delivered them from the bondage of Egypt, and the God who parted the Red Sea, they knew all this, so they do not want to compromise, and of course they want to be faithful till the end. And I just want to run a little bit of how people over time give their lives, were burned at the stake just for their beliefs. Polycarp is one. He is a disciple of John the Apostle. Remember John the Apostle, who wrote the book of Revelation and also Jesus' disciple. And Polycarp was trained by John the Apostle. So here he was told to recant his faith. So undeterred, the proconsul pressed him further to deny Christ. Polycarp declared, 86 years I have been his servant, and he has done me no wrong. How can I blaspheme my king, that is Jesus Christ? How can I blaspheme my king who saved me? So Polycarp concluded, but why do you delay? Come on, do what you will. So they were threatening him to throw him to the lions. They were threatening to burn him, but he said, okay, if you want to do that, go ahead. So Polycarp concluded, but why do you delay? Come on, do what you will. He died a martyr, bound and burned at the stake, then stabbed when the fire failed to consume his body. So that is how Polycarp died. So that's historically you can read. He lived between AD 69 and died AD 156. That's about Polycarp. And many of you know about William Tyndale. The William Tyndale was killed or burned at the stake on October 6th. October 6th is today. You see, that's October 6, 1536. It's his actually a death anniversary, we should say. So William Tyndale was burned at the stake on October 6th, 1536. His sin or the wrongdoing, because he translated Bible into English. If you are reading an English Bible, you should be really thankful for William Tyndale. So many people had put their lives at risk, and William Tyndale's the reason he died was translating the Bible into English language. And of course, there are many others. I cannot go over everyone. I just want to show you how faithful these men of God were. So they died, and in fact William Tyndale was strangled and then he was burnt at the stake, as you see that picture depicted in this picture here. And then many of you know about Graham Staines. Graham Staines was an Australian Christian missionary. He was working with lepers in India, and one night this Raja Dara Singh from Bajrang Dal, he burned alive this missionary, and with his son Philip, aged 10, and Timothy, aged 6, was burned to death in India. So this happened 23rd January 1999. So this Australian missionary, he was helping among the lepers and helping the poor people, and the people with Bajrang Dal, this Dara Singh, and with his mob, they burned him. You can see the picture here, the burnt vehicle. They actually burned the vehicle with the two kids inside and himself with Graham Staines. And then his wife, she went on a national TV and forgave those people, showed the love of Christ to them. But that's a very real story there. There is a book called Burnt Alive, if you want to read the whole biography of their missionary work in India. So you can read that, Burnt Alive, by Graham Staines. But anyway, so I just want to show you how the persecution happens even today. And this happened in 2014 in Pakistan. These two people were just burnt alive in a brick kiln in Pakistan because of their faith. So just because they believed in Christ. And in Pakistan it is like, if you want to kill somebody, you can just say they accuse the prophet or they blaspheme the prophet, or that's enough grounds for them to kill anybody. So that's what happened to this group of people, this couple. They killed and murdered and burned them in the brick kiln in 2014. So here, now going back to our story, in verse 24, then King Nebuchadnezzar was astonished, and he rose in haste and spoke, saying to his counselors, did we not cast 3 men bound in the midst of the fire? So then they answered and said to the king, true, O king. So king was looking into the furnace, maybe a little far off, and seeing this whole thing, what's going on. So they threw these three people bound inside, and now king was astonished to see a different picture there. And he asked, "Did not we cast three men bound in the midst of the fire?" And they answered and said, "Yes, true, true, O king." And here he says, "Look," he answered, "I see four men loose walking in the midst of the fire." I think this should have shocked King Nebuchadnezzar. He threw three men bound inside this fiery furnace, and now here he sees four men loose walking in the midst of the fire. And they and they are not hurt. And the form of the fourth is like the Son of God. You see? The fourth is like the Son of God. The word, the Son of God, is also mentioned even in the Old Testament. Sometimes people say, where is the Son of God mentioned? There is no God's Son mentioned anywhere, and especially Islam denies the Son of God. But Bible is very clear. Even in the book of Daniel, we see this. The fourth is like the Son of God, and there is the same Son of God repeated in the book of Daniel again and again. When we get to the other chapters, I'm going to explain that. But anyway, from the view of the Nebuchadnezzar, he see four men loose walking in the midst of the fire, and they are not hurt. And the form of the fourth is like the Son of God. Then Nebuchadnezzar went near the mouth of the burning fiery furnace and spoke, saying, "Shadrach, Meshach, and Abed-Nego, servants of the Most High God, come out and come here." I think if I were Shadrach, Meshach, and Abed-Nego, and if I am in the fire, I would have said, "King, come here and bring us out. Come inside the furnace and take me out." But then Shadrach, Meshach, and Abed-Nego came from the midst of the fire. So they came out. When the king said, "Come out here," they came out. And now you see the group of the Chaldeans, the satraps, the administrators, the governors, and they were there, right? So what they were doing. So they gathered together, and they saw these men on whose bodies the fire had no power. The hair of their head was not singed, nor were the garments affected, and the smell of the fire was not on them. So clearly you see it's a miracle happening right in front of their eyes. So they were all astonished, including King Nebuchadnezzar. So now, what is king doing now? Nebuchadnezzar spoke, saying, "Blessed be the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abed-Nego." So this is a kind of a guy, when he sees something, just like in chapter 2, what did he do? He fell down and prostrate and worshipped Daniel, when he saw that Daniel was interpreting his dream. And now here he see a miracle that the fourth man was like the Son of God, and they were unharmed by this fire. And now what is he doing? "Blessed be the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abed-Nego, who sent his angel and delivered his servants who trusted him, and they have frustrated the king's word and yielded their bodies, that they should not serve nor worship any god except their own." So here king was proclaiming, praising God. "Therefore, I make a decree that any people, nation, or language," King Nebuchadnezzar likes to give decrees, So one time he said, "Hey, come and worship and come here to my dedication." And now here is another decree. This decree is what? He says, the king make a decree that any people, nation, or language which speaks anything amiss against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abed-Nego shall be cut in pieces, and their houses shall be made ash heap. So dunghill, remember the dunghill we studied? That's the King James translation. That's the same thing here. So always king remembers the same vocabulary, I think. He cut in pieces, throw and make them as ash heap. Because there is no other God who can deliver like this. So here he decrees and says that no one should speak against these guys' God. That also tells me that somebody has told him something bad about these people. So earlier I alluded to the Chaldeans that came and accused about, there are some Jews, they are not worshipping your God. And now he is making it clear. So, if anyone speaks anything against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abed-Nego, they shall be cut in pieces, and their houses shall be made an ash heap, because there is no other God who can deliver like this. Then the king promoted Shadrach, Meshach, and Abed-Nego in the province of Babylon. So now, when there is a trial, when you endure the trial, what happens is there comes the promotion. So you have to endure the trial. I think we see this kind of a concept again and again in the Bible. When you look at Joseph in the book of Genesis, he was thrown into a pit and he was sold as a slave to Egypt, and there he became the prime minister. He endured some hardship, but in the end, you see, Joseph became the prime minister of Egypt. So again, here we see they were thrown into this fiery furnace. They endured that, and now king promoted Shadrach, Meshach, and Abed-Nego in the province of Babylon. So with this, we conclude chapter 3. So next week, God willing, we will study chapter 4, Nebuchadnezzar's account of what happened to him in chapter 4. Thank you for watching. And if you have not subscribed to this video channel, please do subscribe. And if you like the video and the lessons, so please do a like. And also, as I mentioned, you can visit the blog and you can read other details about the topic that I mentioned in today's session, or also the other topics on my blog. So thank you for watching.